Chapter 1. The Quiet Test. They smiled at me like I belonged, while quietly deciding how long I would be allowed to stay. I was invited into his family's world not as a partner, but as a solution, a calm face to protect a powerful name during a dangerous moment. I did not argue. I did not explain. I stayed silent and watched every move. Because when a family underestimates the wrong woman, the truth does not need revenge, it only needs time. My name is Elena, and this is what happened when they thought I was easy to replace. The driveway felt too long for a first meeting, like it was designed to give you time to second-guess yourself before you reached the door. I followed Ethan's black SUV in my older gray sedan, the kind of car that blends into parking lots and never starts conversations. The house sat back from the street in Greenwich, Connecticut, all brick and white columns, hedges clipped into perfect lines, the kind of place that looks calm because everything has been controlled into silence. Ethan glanced at me when we parked. He tried to smile, but it was tight around the eyes. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm okay," I said, and I meant it in the way you mean it when you have decided not to give fear the first word. I had dressed on purpose, dark jeans, a soft cream sweater, boots that were clean but not new, no watch, no statement jewelry, nothing that would either impress them or invite questions. I was not going to lie about who I was, I just wasn't going to sell myself. People who actually cared would ask the right things. People who wanted to judge would fill the quiet with their own conclusions. The entryway opened before Ethan could knock. His mother stood there like she had been waiting behind it the whole time. Victoria Langford had hair that looked professionally arranged, makeup that never moved, and a smile that landed perfectly on her mouth without reaching her eyes. She kissed Ethan's cheek, then kept her hand on his shoulder as if checking that he still belonged to her. "And you must be Nora," she said, looking me over in a single slow sweep. "Nora Bennett," I said. I offered my hand first. She took it lightly, fingers cool and dry. "Come in, dear. We're so happy to finally meet you." Her voice was warm. Her gaze wasn't. It skimmed my sweater, my boots, my purse without a designer tag, then returned to my face as if she had already made a note. Inside, the air smelled like lemon polish and something simmering that felt expensive even without knowing what it was. The entryway held framed photos of charity events, formal smiles, and men in suits holding checks the size of small tables. Nothing looked lived in, everything looked approved. The living room was quiet in a way that made me lower my voice without thinking. Ethan's father, Charles Langford, stood near the fireplace with a drink. He nodded once at Ethan, then at me, like I was a guest he expected to be gone by morning. His sister appeared from the hallway as if she had timed it. Brooke Langford wore a fitted dress and confidence like perfume. She hugged Ethan, then stepped back and looked at me with a smile that felt practiced. "So, you're the woman he's been hiding," she said. Ethan laughed too quickly. "I haven't been hiding her." Brooke's eyes stayed on me. "Private, then." I smiled. "I guess." Dinner was a long table and place settings that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Water glasses caught the light and turned it into little hard diamonds. Victoria took the seat at the head of the table. Ethan guided me into a chair halfway down, not beside him. He didn't notice, or maybe he did and chose not to. Victoria folded her napkin in her lap with careful fingers. "Nora, tell us about yourself," she said. "Where did you grow up?" "Outside Pittsburgh," I said. "Small town." Brooke's eyebrows lifted like I had said something cute. "Oh, that's charming." It wasn't an insult on paper. It still landed like one. "Do you miss it?" Victoria asked. "Sometimes," I said. "There are good people there." Charles took a sip of his drink. "Work." It wasn't a question exactly, it was a demand for a label. "I work in tech," I said. Victoria's expression shifted, polite confusion. "Like support? Customer service?" Ethan's fork paused. "Mom, she means actual tech." He could have said more. He didn't. His eyes dropped to his plate as if it was suddenly fascinating. "I help companies keep their systems clean and compliant, the boring part that keeps everything from breaking." Victoria smiled. That sounds important in its own way. Ethan has always been drawn to capable women. Brooke let out a soft laugh. Capable, yes. The questions kept coming, gentle in tone, sharp in aim. What do my parents do? Where did I go to school? Who do I know? What kind of circles am I used to? When I mentioned my mother had passed, Victoria murmured, "How sad," and moved on so smoothly it felt like the sentence never happened. Ethan tried once, like he remembered he was supposed to. "Nora is brilliant," he said. Victoria looked at him the way you look at a child repeating a fact he'd heard elsewhere. "I'm sure she is, sweetheart." My chest tightened. Not tears, with recognition. I had sat in rooms like this before in my early career, when men spoke over me and called me sweetie, and assumed I was there to take notes. Back then it had stung. Now it was information. Halfway through dinner, Victoria's tone shifted as if she had decided it was time to stop circling and start aiming. "Ethan tells me you two have been discussing the future," she said. "We have," Ethan replied. "And what does the future look like for you, Nora?" Brooke asked, her voice sweet. The question was simple. It was also a trap. If I talked about ambition, I would sound hungry. If I talked about love, I would sound naive. If I talked about calm, I would sound small. "I want a steady life, good work, good people, a home that feels safe." Victoria smiled. Safety matters, especially when you come from more modest circumstances. Ethan's eyes flicked up, then away. He said nothing. Brooke set her fork down like she was clearing space for something bigger. "Ethan used to date a woman who understood our world very well, Serena Coldwell. Have you heard of her?" The name hit like cold water. Victoria watched me closely, pretending she hadn't set it up. "I haven't," I said. "Oh," Brooke said, like it was a pity. She was impressive, very connected, the kind of woman who knows how to navigate certain expectations. I looked at Ethan. His jaw tightened, his gaze slid away from mine. Victoria took a sip of water. "Not everyone is suited for a family like ours. It's not a judgment, dear, it's just reality. We have responsibilities, appearances, people depend on us." There it was, wrapped in velvet, still sharp. Heat rose behind my eyes, not tears, anger, clean and quiet. My grandmother Lillian used to call it the hunger to audition, that impulse to prove your worth to people who had already decided it wasn't there. She taught me to starve it. Ethan's hand brushed my knee under the table, quick and uncertain, then pulled back like he was afraid his mother would see. It was supposed to be comfort. It felt like permission asking. I realized then this evening wasn't about getting to know me. It was a measurement, not of my character, but of what I would tolerate, how much I would swallow while they smiled. After dinner, Victoria insisted we stay for coffee. Brooke offered a tour, her voice warm, her eyes calculating. Charles vanished into his study as if his part had been completed. I followed Brooke down a hallway lined with framed photos. She paused in front of one, Ethan at a gala with Serena Caldwell, both of them smiling like the future was already decided. Brooke turned to me. "You seem nice, Nora. I hope you understand what you're stepping into." I met her gaze and held it. "I understand that people show you who they are when they think you can't affect them," I said. Her smile faltered for a second, then returned, thinner. When we finally left, the night air felt colder than it had when we arrived. Ethan walked me to my car and tried to sound light. "They just want the best for me," he said. I looked at him in the driveway glow, the big house behind him like a shadow. "And I'm supposed to fit into that?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded as if it was obvious. "You will, just give them time." I drove away with my hands steady on the wheel and my mind louder than the engine. They weren't just judging me, they were searching for something behind my quiet, something they could label, use, or dismiss. And the worst part was that Ethan was standing right beside them, hoping I would not notice. Chapter 2. Behind Closed Doors. The realization followed me home quietly, settling in my chest like something unfinished. I replayed the evening in fragments. The polite smiles, the questions that felt rehearsed, the way Ethan's silence had done more damage than any cruel word. I slept lightly, waking with the sense that something important had been said just beyond my hearing. A few days later, Ethan invited me back to the house. "Just coffee," he said. His parents would be busy most of the afternoon. He wanted things to feel easier this time. I told myself that avoiding the place would only keep me guessing. If I stayed in this relationship, I needed clarity, not comfort. So I drove back to Greenwich on a gray Sunday, the sky low and heavy. Ethan greeted me at the door in a worn sweatshirt, trying to look relaxed. "I know last time was a lot," he said. "They mean well, they just worry." I nodded, letting him have that version of the truth. Inside, the house felt quieter without the formality of dinner. Still polished, still controlled, but less performative. Victoria moved around the kitchen, adjusting things that were already perfect. She looked up when she saw me. "Nora," she said, "back so soon?" Brooke appeared moments later, phone in hand, already distracted. "We're juggling a few things today," she said. "Of course," I replied. "I'm happy to sit." Charles passed through long enough to take his coffee and retreat into his study. The door closed softly behind him. Conversation stayed light at first. Weather, traffic, a neighbor's renovation. Ethan hovered, trying to smooth every pause. Then Victoria glanced at Brooke and said, "Ethan, can you bring the boxes from the garage into the study, the ones we discussed?" Ethan hesitated. "Now?" "Yes," Victoria said. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. I smiled and nodded. He left. Brooke stepped closer to the counter. "You're very calm," she said. "That helps. This family values calm." "I value honesty," I said. Her smile tightened. Those two don't always coexist. Victoria turned on the sink, letting the water run before turning it off. "We've had a stressful few months," she said. "It's important that Ethan's life looks stable right now." "Stable," I repeated. Brooke answered. "Partners like stability. Investors too. Uncertainty makes people nervous." I let the word settle. Nervous. Ethan's voice echoed faintly down the hall as boxes shifted. Brooke checked her phone, then leaned closer. "You don't ask many questions," she said. "That's refreshing." "Maybe I'm listening," I replied. Her expression shifted, guarded. Victoria dried her hands and said, "We'll be in the library for a moment." They walked away together. I stayed where I was, telling myself I was respecting privacy. Then I heard my name. "She's more involved than I expected," Brooke said quietly. "Ethan gets attached. That's always been his weakness." "We need to be careful," Brooke said. "The internal review is already making people uneasy. If the deal slows, it's going to raise concerns." Victoria's voice hardened. "That's why appearances matter." "Then she's perfect," Brooke said. "She's quiet. She doesn't draw attention. She doesn't complicate things." There was a pause. "She's temporary," Victoria said. "A safe option. Someone who makes Ethan look settled until everything is finalized." "And after?" Brooke asked. "After, we help him move on. Cleanly, respectfully. There are ways to end things without damage." "Damage to who?" Brooke asked. "To the family," Victoria replied. "To the name." Brooke's tone softened. "Serena understands this world. She always did. She still has connections." Victoria agreed. Serena was always appropriate. The words settled heavily. Temporary, appropriate. Brooke added, "Ethan knows this needs to be handled carefully. He won't love it, but he understands what's at stake." Victoria hesitated. "Does he?" "He always does," Brooke said. My pulse thudded in my ears. Everything aligned. The silences, the careful questions, Ethan's reluctance to speak. This wasn't impulse, it was planning. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned slightly and saw Ethan at the end of the hallway, holding a box. He froze when he saw me. Our eyes met. In his expression, I saw it clearly. Not surprise, not confusion, acceptance. He knew. He looked away first and carried the box into his father's study. The door closed softly behind him. Something in me went cold. I walked back into the kitchen as Victoria and Brooke returned, their expressions smooth again. "Everything okay, Nora?" Victoria asked. "Everything's fine," I said. Ethan reappeared, quieter now. His phone buzzed and he turned it face down. "You want to head out soon?" he asked. "In a bit," I said. On the drive home, he filled the silence with plans and jokes. I listened, storing every word. At my apartment, he reached for my hand. "I didn't want to worry you," he said. "There's just a lot happening." I looked at him. He wasn't lying outright. He was choosing silence. "I'm not worried," I said. "I just like to understand what I'm part of." Relief crossed his face. That night, alone, I sat at my kitchen table and let the quiet settle. Leaving now would give them control over the ending. Staying a little longer would give me something else. Time, information, leverage. I decided I wasn't disappearing on their terms. Not yet.
Chapter 3. Silence is Strategy. I stayed because staying changed the angle of everything. Once you stop trying to escape a situation, you begin to see how it actually works. Days passed, then weeks, and the Whitford world continued to move with its quiet precision. Meetings, dinners, calls that ended the moment I entered a room. I watched without asking, listened without reacting, and learned more than I ever would have by demanding honesty. The proposal came on an evening that looked rehearsed enough to be photographed. Ethan cooked dinner in my apartment, nervously over-seasoning the pasta, checking the oven too often. He kept glancing at me like he was waiting for a signal I did not know how to give. When he finally reached into his pocket, his hands were shaking. "I want us to be a family," he said. "I want this to be real." He dropped to one knee, the ring catching the light from the kitchen window. It was tasteful, expensive in a way that did not shout. I understood immediately that it had been chosen by committee. I looked at him and felt something steady settle inside me. Not excitement, not fear, clarity. "Yes," I said. Relief flooded his face so fast it almost made me smile. He slid the ring onto my finger, kissed my hand, pulled me into a hug that felt grateful rather than passionate. That night, alone in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about what the word fiancé bought me. Time. Access. A front row seat. I did not say yes because I trusted him completely. I said yes because saying no would have ended the story before I understood its ending. The reaction from his family was immediate and telling. Victoria called the next morning, voice warm and triumphant. "We are so pleased," she said. "This is a big step." Brooke followed up with a text asking to meet for lunch. She chose a quiet restaurant in Midtown, the kind with white tablecloths and private corners. She arrived early, already seated, posture perfect. "Congratulations," she said, smiling. "There are just a few things we should talk through now that you are officially part of the picture." I nodded. "Of course." She slid a folder across the table, light brown, unmarked. "This is nothing unusual," she said, "just standard considerations. Image alignment, privacy, boundaries." I opened it slowly. Suggestions dressed up as guidelines, recommendations that read like rules, dress choices for public events, social media restraint, a reminder that discussing work outside approved settings could create misunderstandings. "And this," she added, tapping the last page, "a prenup. Very fair, very protective." "Protective of whom?" I asked. She smiled. "Of everyone." I read the document carefully. It was written to safeguard reputation more than assets, clauses about public statements, confidentiality, discretion. Silence, formalized. "I will review it," I said. "Good," she replied.
We value cooperation." As she spoke, my mind drifted backward to another version of myself, years earlier, standing in conference rooms where people assumed I was there to schedule meetings or refill coffee. I remembered being overlooked, mistaken for support staff because I did not announce my credentials. Back then, it frustrated me. My grandmother Evelyn used to laugh when I told her. "Loud people want to be seen," she would say. "Quiet people want to understand. Power belongs to the ones who know when to speak." She had raised me after my mother died, taught me to listen before I moved, to wait until patterns revealed themselves. Sitting across from Brooke, I felt that lesson settle deeper. Work continued alongside the engagement, as if my life existed in parallel tracks. I stayed involved in a consulting project with Natalie Cross, a sharp M&A specialist who had built a career navigating corporate restructures. We spoke often, sometimes about work, sometimes about nothing at all. One afternoon, over coffee near my office, she mentioned a client without naming names. "They are nervous," she said. "Internal review started late last year. Now everyone is watching their messaging more than their numbers." "Messaging," I repeated. She nodded. "Reputation risk, compliance gaps. You can feel when something is being held together with language instead of truth." The words echoed things I had heard at the Whitford house: restructuring, stability, image. I asked a few careful questions. Natalie answered without realizing how much she was confirming. Later that week, Ethan mentioned an upcoming audit in passing, like it was an inconvenience. "It's just procedural," he said. "My mother is stressed for no reason." I smiled and said nothing. The pieces were aligning, not dramatically but inevitably. The family dinners grew more formal. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms, then resumed with polite smiles. Ethan began taking calls outside, lowering his voice, ending them when he saw me watching. One evening, as we sat on the couch, he spoke without looking at me. "After the wedding, things will settle down," he said. "We can clean up some old connections." "Old connections," I repeated. He nodded. "There are people from my past that no longer fit. It's better to make clean transitions." I waited. "Like Serena," he added quickly. "That chapter is closed. It just needs to be handled properly." "Properly for whom?" I asked. He hesitated. "For everyone." The answer told me everything. A few days later, I confirmed what I already knew. Through Natalie, through public filings, through the quiet network of professionals who notice when big firms are tightening their language, I learned that Whitford Holdings was working closely with one of the Big Four. The scrutiny was real, the risk was real, and any disruption to their carefully managed image could unravel months of negotiation. That night, I sat alone, engagement ring heavy on my hand, and understood the role I'd been cast in. Not partner, not equal, buffer, stability signal, something calm to point to while the ground shifted beneath them. The realization did not hurt the way betrayal is supposed to. It clarified. I did not need to expose them or confront them. I did not need to raise my voice or force a confession. I only needed to remain exactly where I was. Quiet, observant, present. When the truth finally surfaced, it would not need my help. I just had to be there to see who would pretend they never asked me to disappear.
Chapter 4. The Room Where Everything Changed. The invitation arrived 3 weeks later, printed on thick cream paper, understated in the way expensive things often are. A Whitford Holdings Strategic Update, Manhattan, private guest list. Ethan handed it to me like it was an afterthought, but his fingers lingered for half a second too long. "It will be a big night," he said. "My mother wants everything perfect." "Of course she does," I replied. The venue was a private event space overlooking the Hudson. Glass walls, low lighting, the city stretched out like a controlled backdrop. When we arrived, the room already hummed with quiet power. Board members clustered near the windows. Advisors spoke in low voices, words like projections and exposure floating just beneath the music. Servers moved with practiced invisibility. Victoria Whitford stood near the center of it all, dressed in dark silk, posture rigid, eyes sharp. Brooke was never far from her side, scanning the room, adjusting conversations with subtle touches to arms and elbows. Ethan stayed close to me, his smile fixed, his jaw tight. "You look great," he murmured. I had chosen carefully again, a simple black dress, tailored but unremarkable, hair pulled back, makeup minimal, nothing that demanded attention, nothing that suggested I was trying to belong. As we moved through the room, I felt it before I heard it, a pause in conversation, a flicker of recognition in a man's eyes as they landed on my face. "Elena Hawthorne," he said slowly, stepping forward. "We met years ago, didn't we? San Francisco, that fintech conference." I smiled. "We did. You spoke on data governance," he continued, "one of the clearer sessions that year." Victoria turned toward us, her expression polite but strained. "You know my son's fiancée," she said. The man nodded. "I didn't realize," he said. "Congratulations." Brooke's eyes narrowed just slightly. As the evening unfolded, it happened again. A woman from a consulting firm mentioned a panel I had moderated. A partner asked if I was still involved in compliance advisory work. Each recognition landed softly, but shifted something in the room. I was no longer invisible. I was context. Natalie Cross arrived halfway through the reception, sleek and confident, a glass of wine already in hand. She spotted me and smiled. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said. "Or maybe I did." She greeted Ethan politely, then nodded toward Victoria. "Whitford Holdings has been busy lately," she said conversationally. "Lots of moving pieces." Victoria's smile tightened. "We thrive under pressure." Natalie's eyes flicked to me. "Elena has been invaluable on our current project. Very steady, very precise." I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. The presentation began shortly after the reception. Guests took their seats, conversations dimming. A Whitford executive stepped onto the small stage, slides appearing on the screen behind him. Growth projections, strategic alignment, reassuring language wrapped around selective numbers. I listened, not as a guest, but as a professional, and I saw it. A slide that leaned too hard on phrasing, controls described in ways that sounded correct but felt incomplete. The presenter moved on quickly. A hand raised from the second row. "Can you clarify your internal review process?" the voice asked, specifically how oversight is structured during this transition period. The room shifted. Victoria's shoulders squared. The presenter answered smoothly, but it did not address the gap. I felt something settle in me, calm and focused. I raised my hand. The moderator nodded. "Yes." I spoke evenly. "In similar restructures, effective compliance depends on independent reporting lines. Can you speak to how those are maintained while senior leadership is directly involved in negotiations?" The silence that followed was not hostile. It was heavy. The presenter glanced toward Victoria. She did not nod. Ethan leaned toward me. "Elena, maybe we can talk about this later." The moderator waited. The presenter cleared his throat. "We are confident in our processes." I smiled slightly. "Confidence is important, so is documentation." A murmur rippled through the room. Advisors exchanged looks. Natalie did not look at me, she watched Victoria. Victoria rose slowly. "Perhaps we should take questions offline," she said. "Tonight is about vision." The moderator hesitated. Of course, but the shift had already happened. The room was no longer listening to the script, it was listening to the silence around the answers. During the break, people approached cautiously, not to accuse, to assess. Victoria pulled Ethan aside, her voice low and sharp. Brooke joined them, her expression tight. I stood near the window, looking out at the river, the city lights blurring together. Natalie came to stand beside me. "That was well handled," she said quietly. "I didn't say anything that wasn't reasonable," I replied. She nodded. "That's what made it impossible to ignore." Ethan approached a moment later, his face pale. "What was that?" he asked under his breath. "It was a question," I said. His eyes flicked toward his mother. This wasn't the place. I met his gaze. It was exactly the place. The rest of the evening unfolded in careful fragments. Victoria regained her composure, smiling, redirecting, but the tension remained. Conversations were shorter, laughter was thinner.
When it was time to leave, Victoria kissed my cheek. "You surprised us tonight," she said. I smiled. "I didn't intend to." Ethan walked with me toward the waiting car, the night air cool against my skin. Behind us, the room continued without us, but not as it had begun. I watched the glass doors close, the reflections shifting. I understood then that the consequences would not be immediate. They would come in meetings that grew tense, in emails rewritten too many times, in partners who asked careful questions. I slid into the car, the door closing softly. I had not exposed them. I had not confronted them. I had simply stood where they did not expect me to stand. And the room we had just left would never feel the same again.
Chapter 5. After the noise faded. The weeks that followed moved quietly, but nothing returned to the way it had been before. I felt it first in the pauses, calls that were not returned as quickly, meetings that were rescheduled more than once, names that stopped appearing together in the same sentences. Whitford Holdings did not collapse in any dramatic way. It tightened, it slowed, it drew inward. Ethan tried to pretend everything was normal. He still texted good morning, still asked about my day, still spoke about future plans in vague, careful language. But something essential had shifted. He no longer sounded certain of his place inside his own life. The audit moved faster than anyone had expected. It was described publicly as routine, but behind closed doors, the tone changed. Advisors rotated in and out. Messaging became cautious, then defensive. I did not need inside information to understand what was happening. I had spent years watching organizations unravel, not from scandal, but from sustained scrutiny. Victoria stopped calling. When she did reach out, it was brief and polite, her voice carefully neutral. "We have all been under a lot of pressure," she said once. "I hope you understand." I did understand. Pressure reveals priorities. Brooke sent one final message, professional and distant. "We will need to revisit certain arrangements in the coming months." She did not ask how I was. She did not congratulate me on anything. She treated me the way you treat a variable that no longer behaves as expected. Ethan began staying later at the office. When he came home, he was distracted, his attention pulled somewhere else. He took calls in the other room, lowered his voice, ended them quickly when I appeared. One evening I asked him directly, "Are you okay?" He hesitated, then sat down across from me, rubbing his hands together. "Things are complicated right now," he said. "My parents are under a lot of stress. People are asking questions." "Questions about what?" I asked. "About everything," he said. "About leadership, about decisions, about optics." Optics, the word hung between us. He looked at me then, really looked like he was searching for reassurance. "We just need to get through this period," he said. "Once it settles, everything will be easier." I knew then that he still believed in waiting it out, in letting time smooth over what should be confronted. That had always been his way. A few days later, he called me from his car, voice tight. "My mother thinks we should take some space," he said. "Just for now. Let things cool down." "Space," I repeated. "It might help," he added quickly. "Less attention, less speculation." I closed my eyes, not because I was overwhelmed, but because the decision had already formed. "I think we should end this," I said. Silence filled the line. "What?" he said. "Why now?" "Because staying no longer makes sense," I replied. "Not for me." He tried to argue, to explain, to promise that things would change once the pressure lifted. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I spoke carefully. "You did not protect me when it mattered," I said. "You protected the image. I cannot build a life on that." He said my name once, quietly. I ended the call. The separation was not dramatic. There were no raised voices, no final confrontation. We exchanged belongings. We signed what needed to be signed. The engagement ring sat between us on the table, untouched. "You did not even fight for it," he said softly. I looked at him. "I fought for clarity," I said. "This is what it looks like." After that, his messages slowed, then stopped. Occasionally, I heard updates through mutual acquaintances.
Whitford Holdings postponed a major announcement. A partnership dissolved quietly. Ethan stepped down from a visible role, reassigned to something less public. I felt no satisfaction in that, only a sense of inevitability. My life settled into something calmer. I returned fully to my work, projects that demanded focus rather than performance. Natalie and I continued our collaboration, steady and professional. One afternoon, she asked me if I regretted not pushing harder that night in Manhattan. No, I said, the truth does not need force. I slept better. I stopped replaying conversations in my head. I no longer felt the need to explain myself to rooms that had already decided how they would hear me. Sometimes I thought about my grandmother Evelyn, her quiet confidence, the way she would watch people carefully before deciding who they really were. Silence is not absence, she used to say. It is space, and space lets the truth move. Months later, I ran into Victoria at a charity event. We exchanged polite smiles, nothing more. She looked tired, older somehow. When she walked away, I felt no urge to follow the story further. I had my own. The hardest lesson was also the most freeing. I had not been underestimated because I lacked value. I had been underestimated because I did not advertise it, and that misunderstanding had protected me more than any defense ever could. If you are listening to this and it sounds familiar, ask yourself something. Have you ever been dismissed because you stayed quiet? Have you ever been treated as temporary because you did not demand attention? And when that happened, did you try to prove yourself to the wrong people, or did you choose yourself instead? I would love to hear your story.